Hey there, Andrew. Really, really great score. Real interesting stuff that you've got going on here. And it's just a shame that it ended so quickly, right? We could have gone all the way through to D, but maybe you ran out of time or you had to do other things or whatever. It's all completely understandable. That's all fine. So let's just take a look at a few things, some balance issues, some other things. I feel that you start out pretty nicely, but there were a few things that are just a little strange to me. Like, why are the strings pianissimo at the same level as the horns, right? Why are the oboes pianissimo at the same level as the horns? Like you're basically saying that you want the horns to be on an equal level to oboes and strings, when it's really the horns that should be behind the strings and the winds, right? And I'm not seeing any marking on the glockenspiel, and of course, you can't really hear it in the mock-up at all. Um, I don't really see any reason for the oboes to be pianissimo. I mean, were you perhaps afraid that the first oboe would kind of drown out the first flute up here and piccolo and so on? I see. I don't really feel that there's any need for that. However, like the piccolo part should just have been, yeah, you can get a little bit of earthy, breathy tone out of it to sort of match everybody else. But when you have this many winds piled up underneath it, really what you want here is third flute, right? Or more properly, what might work better is to have this being A2 first and second flute, and this being third flute underneath. Now you go really low with your third flute going into a pianissimo, and that is perfectly all right because more or less there will be a little bit of a balance here with some of your lower instruments kind of taking similar roles right in here, or some of the same notes. But really, I mean, when you get to this E here in your second flute, even at pianissimo with triple P horns, it's just really kind of no point, right? It would be better to have this be like a triple unison above. But I feel like this would be a way better way of managing the dynamics. To have everybody everybody piano, okay. To have piccolo just change into a regular flute part, and the strings as well to be piano, because like you just really cannot hear. You can hear hardly any kind of contribution to the sound. You can leave the horn at pianissimo. Now be aware that like in your mock-ups, when you have like 3 diminuendo marks in a row, what it does is it just reduces the volume, right? So unless you were to like put in an invisible piano mark like this, right? That kind of thing, right? I mean, that is why your dynamics keep sort of disappearing, right? And things just seem incredibly soft and ephemeral, and actually sound a little bit louder on the last chord, just because you push this down to from pianissimo to triple P to quadruple P according to what Sibelius thinks, right? And then when you get to here, things come up a little bit in their dynamic level. So yeah. Yeah, and it's like here you've got pizzicato double basses, and they're playing fairly long pitches. So I just even though it's obvious, I always add the word sostenuto, or just abbreviate it SOS period, just to let the player know that you haven't accidentally confused pizzicato with arco. Do you know what I mean? Just I would just add sostenuto. So pizzicato, sostenuto here after the dynamic marking, and yeah, just to clue the players in that it isn't an accident, which is something that can happen a lot with, first time orchestral readings and so on. And you've got muted strings here. Now, do the mutes come off here? You've got this nice long rest, very, very easy, right? So would you be going, here you're playing mezzo forte, and, you're asking your mezzo forte strings to be playing against unmuted lower strings, right? And you got these, this brass in here, there's the, muted trumpets. So muted trumpets don't necessarily, just because it's a muted trumpet doesn't mean that it necessarily is a good choice alongside muted strings, or especially muted violins, right? I mean that it's not just because they're both muted, it doesn't mean that they go together, right? Because the mute is not so much a way of quieting things down; it's a way of changing the timbral quality, right? So. So you might have a more distant, edgy kind of a quality to the trumpets, and that might actually work beautifully inside muted strings, but it might actually just really drown them out, right? So I would really recommend going back to unmuted, just mutes off right here. There's tons of time, okay? Now, once again, you have been around the block, I think, on some of these evaluations, and you know my feelings about niente, right? There is nothing about this this chord and the roll here that draws the attention of the listener towards the fact that your timpanist is able to die down to absolutely nothing, right? In the context of everything else, everybody sharing the same note, many instruments sharing the same pitch, like cello and bassoon and so on. And then of course, like the overtones of the instruments below and so on. There is absolutely nothing that draws the ear of the listener towards the effect, like saying, "Wow, I can go way down to we're just drawing the listener's attention down, 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 down." Right? That's really. You would be better off just putting triple P at the end, because it is exactly the same thing, right? So when you say niente, you are saying take extra care here, because this is an effect that is important for the listener to hear, right? And then you're giving the player something in the context that nobody in the audience will really appreciate. They'll hear this rumble and it'll sort of fade away, which would be exactly the same thing if you added triple P. So if going diminuendo to triple P is exactly the same as niente in the context of something that doesn't matter anyways, then use triple P. Do not use niente. Just really be careful about how you use niente. Niente is an atmospheric effect, really. Okay, and the fact that Sibelius gives people niente hairpins and has a nice engraved N for niente and so on and so forth just does not mean that we have the license to use it as a shorthand for just diminuendo down to triple P, right? So just really, really, really do not overuse that special effect. It's sort of like using. I think when we first started the orchestration challenges, I saw a lot of scores used col legno, right, instead of pizzicato, in places where pizzicato, pretty much did what the orchestrator needed it to do, and the col legno was completely invisible, right? So it's just a matter of just deciding, being aware of what is an effect and what isn't. Okay, now, big comment about all of this. One part of me really approves of the fact that you haven't slurred across repeated notes like many, many, many other entries have. Okay? But the other part of me is worried because it seems that this is just indicative of an overall problem of not having any slurs at all, right? So it's just like, every pitch is the same as every articulation on every pitch is the same as the next pitch is the same as the next pitch, right? You have no sense of melisma in any of these lines. So perhaps that was avoiding, maybe you feel like you didn't really have the experience to provide them yet. You wanted some feedback from me, or you wanted to see what everybody else was doing. I would say, like, just try to stay with kind of more more obvious kinds of slurring. Like you could have like a slur between these two pitches here and your violins and so on. You could have had like a little portato here. You could have tenuto marks connected by a slur, so you could have that kind of idea. And you could have definitely had a slur here, right? And then here, these could have all been slurred, da da. Maybe not slur it between these two, but just from the C to the B, the A to the G, and so on. And you could have easily added like very long phrase marks over your harp if you liked. It's kind of neat, the idea of the triple octave roll. A very cool idea. Has a very kind of a glistening sort of a sound. A little in competition with the glockenspiel, but you added the glockenspiel at least in these first two bars of its entrance in places where the harp isn't playing, right? But then here you're basically just underlining what the harp is doing, or overlining. Does that make sense? Yeah, but once again, like dynamic marking here, we need to know. And I would definitely mark at the same level as the harp. Whatever the harp is, the glockenspiel should be at the same level, right? So if the harp is forte, glockenspiel should be forte. I think probably mezzo forte in a real orchestral situation is what I would score. So piano on winds and strings, mezzo forte on harp and glockenspiel, and pianissimo on the horns. And just really watch out, like in a mock-up situation, when you put a bunch of diminuendo marks in a row. That is why instead of sounding very poetic and heartfelt towards the end here, it just really starts to sound kind of weak and fading away, right? It's because it is literally fading away because of the marks that you left it, right? Everybody should share the same marks, I feel, in this. So like you left out some diminuendo hairpins here and so on. And in the strings, everybody should have the same kind of thing. If you've got a lift here for your winds, then that same pausa, the same breath mark, comma, however you want to put it, should go into the strings as well, so they have a chance to sort of lift, right? So here's where I think that slurs would also work really, really well. Da 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 da. Right? Yeah, and keeping this so soft, right? Pianissimo. What we're doing here is like the little counter melody, the little middle voice is so weak here, right? In the scoring because of the way that you've framed the dynamics, that it's really hard to feel it as an equal, as kind of an equal member of the proceedings, right? So just really watch out for things like that, right? So just like kind of overall comments before I move on about this section here, and that is that I think that you could have gotten the same amount of kind of beautiful glowing effect in the winds by using less players, right? Like it's just really heavily stacked. You've got three flute members, or excuse me, two flute members, flute family members, and one oboe on the top B, and then you've got, and then here you've got like the clarinets, and kind of like doubling what's going on below. So it's just like it's really, really kind of, I mean, and it still has this beautifully glowing effect, but it's It's just really kind of it's a bit massive for kind of the delicacy that I know that you are intending, right? But I think adding the strings is great. I think adding glockenspiel is great. I'm a little dubious about pianissimo, like starting pianissimo on this F sharp and then going all the way up to G, like as you're diminuendoing, right? So like you're thinking like, what would the dynamic be here? Pianissimo, triple P, whatever, and you're going up to like heading up into this territory here. So in Sibelius, I would say, yeah, just really listen to, like with horns, just watch out for those high notes because they're hard to play really softly. And it just puts extra stress on the player's embouchure. I mean, in some ways, it's like it's harder to play really soft up there than it is to play really loud, right? Just the tendency of the instrument to project more, and even though you this sounding D here, you feel is going to be kind of discreet and it's going to be a very beautiful little color. The fact is that it really is going to play. It's going to be a much more prominent element than the violin right in here, right? So you just have to be careful how that once again, like the whole idea of having pianissimo horns and pianissimo strings or pianissimo violins like on the same pitches. Who wins that battle? Horns every single time. So it'd be better to have the violins to be piano, right? Even with the mutes, you could have a muted piano, right? You could have a muted fortissimo. All right, so I'll get off of this section, but those are my thoughts of the beginning page there. Now, heading on into this, I felt that if you're going to put this much weight in the middle here, with mezzo forte, muted trumpets, and the violins taking the octave, the trumpets are so much more penetrating than the violins that I really feel that you should double this line, right? This is starting to get a little fussy. The whole idea of taking a comma, taking a kind of a sort of placing the next pitch. I feel it's outlived its usefulness by the time you get to the end of this section, right? So I wouldn't keep doing it, right? It's almost just becomes like kind of the restraint becomes a bit affected, right? Kind of like somebody that has a weird accent because like they're afraid of just firmly saying what they want, so that they kind of are just holding back in places, and finally you just feel like saying, will you just please say what you want, say what you mean, right? So I feel that can have the emotional consequence, right, of having too many of these placed rhythms in a row. Okay, so just the first time was great, it was cool, and then after that it just gets a little too affected, right? All right, now here we get some dynamics out of our glockenspiel part, but then what's the triangle dynamic? Yeah. You would be better off having the triangle play on a single line staff with a regular note head, rather than this kind of drum kit sort of notation with a X head, right? So the X note heads have their place mainly in like crossover scoring and scoring with mixed percussion and things like that. There's absolutely no need for them in a single part like this in a concert score. All right, you just have zero need for it. So just score it the normal way. All right, so back to our whole question here. I think it's really cool like that. I think that the overall idea of your scoring here was great, and the overall idea of your scoring here is great too. But it's just like, you want to achieve those. You want to achieve those kinds of effects, and so how do you get to that point, right? How can you accomplish that? I like the idea that the sort of stack that you've got going on here with the English horn and clarinets and the trumpets. But yeah, just once again, like if it, even it were just like a single oboe player or A2 flutes or some other kind of thing, this has got to soar above the trumpets. Otherwise, the trumpets basically just, with their overtones, they kind of kill the violin line, and they kill it in a way that is ignominious, if you don't mind me using a fancy word. It kills them in a way where you can still hear them, but they have no impact. Right? That is worse than them being covered. Right? There are fates worse than death. Right? There are fates worse than oblivion, and that is to, is to be up there and to be weak. So look, seriously, either take this out or fatten it up. Okay, and glockenspiel is not enough, right? So I would say like one flute, one oboe, maybe two flutes even. This would be a great place to throw in piccolo, actually. Like the piccolo's low register doubling with the violin would be kind of a nice effect. I mean, it would be a little weaker than just adding a regular flute, though. Okay. Then here you've got like rock bottom contrabassoon and tuba in unison, followed, like then an octave higher and so on. This is going to be more brutal than you think. Right? I mean, even at mezzo piano, right? It's like to get a beautiful smooth sound down there. I think piano would be the dynamic I would use rather than mezzo piano. I would just really keep it as cool as possible, or just have the contrabassoon and the tuba play in octaves, right? Even with this going up an octave, up to the the D in the middle of the staff, right? But like just that rock bottom D down there. It's a special note for a reason. The why they have marked it, and for a stone cold pro, it is no big deal, right? But it isn't, even with all the other cushioning and stuff, it isn't the smoothest sound. All right. Now here you say you've got this sort of reversed, like you want this low D, right? And you want to provide the upper one as an alternative if their instrument is incapable of playing it, right? So the parentheses should go around the top one, not the bottom one, right? So you're saying, I want this note, get rid of the parentheses, put the parentheses above saying, and by the way, if you can't reach that pitch, it's okay if you play that one. All right? So I'm seeing a lot of reversals. I might add this to like kind of maybe a minor checklist of things to watch out for. All right, but like looking at the overall scoring, I really love this idea of it's very French sounding. The muted horns and the doubling kind of cushion in the lower winds, and a stronger melody line above in the violins would be nice. But the way that this unfolds, and this wonderful interpretation of the left-hand patterns, and you added this, and that I feel makes it all worth it. Really, just really, really nice. Be careful about crossing. Like it confuses the clarity of the pattern, right? So like here you've got C and E going back and forth, and here you have C and E as well, but this is the E and that's the C, and this is the C and that's the E, right? So it might be better to adjust this, like, going D, F sharp, D, F sharp, D, F sharp, E, C, E, right? So that they're in, and then this D is a unison in both parts, so that they just flow together better, right? Just watch out when they cross over. Like you've got that here as well. And here, you also have the reversal as well. So just really watch out for those things that, and here, like, this is actually playing under this, right? So just be really careful for those moments. And then here, where we have more emphasis on yeah, da 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 da, just be very aware that the pattern in the second violins can interfere with the clarity of that little statement. I really love this, by the way, the trombones being used. I think that is a wonderful color at a piano dynamic to be using with your middle strings. Beautiful idea. And then here, like, you're coming back with your massed winds. And I love the context, the sort of echo of the texture, right? Of course, in a mezzo forte kind of context rather than the sort of pianissimo. All right, so it's continuing on, and this is also very cool. The echo, right? You've got the da 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 da, and the trumpets bum bum bum, and the horns echoing, and then da 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 da. That's so cool. All right, in there. I really enjoyed this. So I think that if these players are no longer going to be an important part of the sound picture, then they should diminuendo out, right? Because you're gaining strength with your other players here, with your strings and your winds. But like the way that you have scored this, the brass will just continue playing and then they'll cut off here, right? They'll shape the note, they'll shape the end of the note, but it's not going to necessarily diminuendo. And then same thing here. This chord will just last till the end of the bar with a little bit of a shaped ending. And meanwhile, these players are pushing into it, and as they push up to their forte, you'll feel the sudden absence of strength, right? Whereas if you fade out before, just like your bassoon, bass trombone, excuse me, and tuba are doing, which by the way should end, the diminuendo should end there. So if you just make this universal and then have also a diminuendo there, then it will fade out, and this transition between the nice warm brass colors in the middle and the strings coming in won't be so abrupt. All right. Okay, so we have some big problems here. All right. All right, you have sort of set up this big gushing kind of soloistic passage for your harp, and there's just no chance. Right? And you can hear it in the mock-up too. I mean, where's the harp, right? I mean, even if you marked your harp part up to fortissimo or triple F, all right, there's just no way that the harp could compete with the strength of what's going on here in your forte winds and strings. And you might think, well, maybe they could come out of the picture while I go diminuendo, but the diminuendo is maybe down to mezzo forte and then coming back up and blah blah. So yeah, and then you also have vibraphone coming in here, and vibraphone is also an incredibly soft instrument, and you have to just really carefully, you have to use it in softer passages, places where it's like right here, this is great, but I'm not seeing any dynamic marking, no phrase markings, and no pedal markings, and I'm also like not seeing anything like a crescendo I love the phrase mark, but like where's the shape? Where's the dynamic shape here, right? See, going down to mezzo piano, you're giving the vibraphone a chance to participate in a meaningful way, but it's still like, I feel that this should have faded down to like piano, right? In all the parts together the same way, right? Not just diminuendo to the end of the bar like you've got here, but like look what you've done in here in the strings. That's the model for what the wind should be doing in all parts. And that really gives the vibraphone a chance to play along with the strings and just get that wonderful mixed sound of vibraphone and strings. When the gods are smiling, the intonation gods are smiling down upon the orchestra, the combination of these sounds can be incredible. It can be ethereal, it can be transcendent. When they are not, that's a different story. Okay. Sometimes the intonation can get a little strange between vibraphone and strings in unison. Anyway, that's one reason why they're avoided sometimes and sometimes not. Right. This is all very cool though. Let's just look at how you set this up. I like what you're doing here, like getting some distance above the left-hand patterns. And then, the flutes right in here and the bassoons and so on. Even though you're kind of going a little bit lower with the flutes, that like the sense of motion in here, I think justifies it. Just so long as the everybody isn't too loud right in here. To be brutally honest about this, clarinets up to right around here would have been a more balanced decision, right? Or even oboes, and just leave the flutes out, right? But there are ways of making this work. All right, so I think that like since you're making space right in here for the trumpets and the trombones and so on, and you've got some doubling here in the strings and everything else. It'll sort of work. There's no need to bring the volume down too much, right? But I would still like some dynamic shaping in here, da da da. So is there a push into this dynamically and then a diminuendo? Or maybe the diminuendo here, da 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 da. Right? Just, and here you're sort of having the trumpets and the trombones work in synchronization with each other. But remember, the trombones on the previous screen, they were piano, right? And here you have trumpets playing mezzo forte. And then here they kind of seem to be working together. So do you really want that difference of 3 dynamic degrees apart? So just, some rethinking or some, I would just say there's a lot to your ambition here in the way that you're scoring it. There might be 1 or 2 elements too much. This is a completely easy transition, just putting the triangle down and picking up the sticks for the vibraphone. They might even actually be holding the sticks already. Holding the mallets for the vibraphone, standing over the vibraphone, going ting, ting, ting on the triangle, and then just putting it down and then hitting this note on the vibes. Right? That's all real easy, I think. Now, are you aware that this is, you're not going brrr ting or brrr boom, right? You're going da 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 da, right? So you're playing 6 eighth notes in a row. I would completely notate this out, just to remove any misunderstandings. All right, notate out every pitch on your first beam grouping, your first instance, and then the second one abbreviate, because it is so easy for people scoring in Sibelius to accidentally put the wrong beams over a tremolo. What would be a roll ends up being ta 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 ta, right? So always notate out these things the first time if you are doing anything that is not a roll. All right, and that would go for the same thing for similar parts in other instruments, not just timpani. Okay, so then kind of looking at this, I just really love the continuing. I think this is just all beautifully modeled scoring, and then the support for the first violins. I think that works fantastically well. I don't see why, though, the second violin should stop getting support. Do we really need all these instruments playing along with the strings? I think that there could be ways here of maximizing like the flow here of the figuration. I think it's just a little weak right in here, and of course, like the harp is incapable against this weight of tone. It's a throwaway part, and so is the vibraphone. If you were to take your vibraphone an octave higher, if you were to have your harp maybe playing this kind of figuration an octave higher, an octave higher than where this is scored, that kind of thing, like this big beautiful gushing interpretation of the piano part, like once again, like don't drop the piano part onto the harp part. It's a little bit of that's sort of what's going on here. They're not exactly right. So in order for this to work, everybody would have to shut the hell up, They'd have to all be playing pianissimo or piano. Okay. Yeah, and then, but this is really lovely. I love the way that this trades off and then holds on, as it goes up. This is just one of the best parts of the entire score. Yeah, and just like the way that you're using the harp, like, see, this is great. If there was less weight here, then this would be really lovely. But you don't even need that. All you just need are the cellos. Maybe you could have like Divisi basses or Divisi cellos also playing pizzicato to sort of get more of that like punctuated sound. And you don't need the harps then. Right? But I would just say rethink how you're doing the harps here. I mean, there's something you can set them to work on. Take the vibraphone part and octifier. Oop. Okay, and then like right in here, the harp is perfectly fine. This just all works really great. The harp working with the bassoons and it's wonderful, the sense of trading off. Like vibraphone was working with strings before, like doubling some of the pitches, and the strings were holding on to the pitches as they went forward. And now here you're doing the same model with harp and vibraphone doubling the winds as well. Okay. All right, but I mean, Andrew, we have to talk about this. Do you really want to obliterate the beautiful, the absolutely gorgeous effect that you have got going on here? This wonderful outpouring of like, and then this beautiful little way that you wrap it up in the clarinets. It's just lovely. And completely eclipsed by the pushing into forte, right? And you can hear it on the mock-up as well. Here the mock-up is not lying to you. So you have to decide one or the other, right? You are sacrificing your beautiful idea on the altar of your need to push up to a forte. What if they just pushed up to like mezzo piano, right? Or what if they pushed up to a mezzo piano and then they went mezzo forte or forte here? There's also the problem here that you are pushing this higher harmony here in the trumpets, and then you suddenly have like zero trumpets, right? So they just suddenly, we hear this big fall off of density and intensity, which is in no way compensated for by anything going like the flutes and the strings and the other things that are playing over similar pitches, right? The clarinets that are playing over similar pitches to what the trumpets did. They are absolutely incapable of supplementing the energy that was created by the trumpets flaring out to a forte. I mean, it's such a great idea. It's like you just choose one or the other. And then here you've got this sort of reversal. You have diminuendo to forte, right? I'm just going to hop up here. Yeah, so you see you have mezzo piano. And here you have a mezzo piano dying away. So here you absolutely, I would have a destination dynamic at the end of this bar of whatever, pianissimo or piano or whatever. And then I would say forte subito following, just the player just really ready. I'm going to go down to soft and then boom, right? I mean, and yes, it would be like some music engraving whizzes out there might say, well, no, I mean, I disagree because it's obvious, you're going down to pianissimo here and then forte there, so it's obvious that it's subito. But I would say that, yes, it's obvious that it's subito, but you're giving the player a little extra information. It's not that you're saying that they're not smart enough to realize that is subito, but it's just sort of realizing that they're, to just really come in strong, that everybody is going to be doing that, and there's, and if other players around them are going to be going crescendo and they're going diminuendo down to a really soft thing, they're not crazy, right? Different sections of the orchestra are working at different dynamic levels, and they should just be ready because they're going to be joining in with that push, right? So that would be my reason for going diminuendo to pianissimo and then subito forte, right? Or forte subito, to use the right word order. All right, and then here you have chimes. It's kind of nice. Now I feel that like when we get past C, you may have like sort of run out of time, right? So I'm not going to be judgmental about lack of development of leaving out figuration, the left-hand patterns, and so on and so forth, right? But I'll just talk about the beginnings of your idea and where it could have gone, right? But let's finish up how this is all working. Okay, so here you have this fade at the end going towards this exposed pattern, the first flute dropping down, and some of that same kind of thing as we had before, sort of in a reverse direction of the violins holding on and so on. Okay, so the problem that we have here is that the ear, right, especially the uneducated ear, will tend to not follow the lower, the descending pitch, right? They'll tend to not follow it unless it's in a very strong instrument. And here you're sort of fading out. By the time we get here, we're piano, and who knows where these other instruments are, right? So you have to be very, very clear about where everybody is going diminuendo to, so that you have space and you don't have an awkward dropout. Like for instance, here I would say diminuendo to pianissimo, right? And then here, this is all fine, and this first bar, but here I would say mezzo forte, diminuendo, and then when you get to a pitch that is just going to be holding on after the flute has passed by and has descended, then that's when you want it to be softer, right? So I would say mezzo forte, diminuendo to piano at this point, and then maybe a little bit more, diminuendo to the pianissimo coming up. Same thing here. If this is coming in, doubling the flute, it's fine. This could be mezzo forte, but when you get to here, diminuendo to piano, same thing. So that like whatever note is holding on past when the flute is descending, below that pitch, should be much softer, just so that the ear, like the holding on of these notes, especially against the flute going to its softest and most delicate register, it isn't obscured by your sustaining certain pitches, right? Okay, now here, piano, I think you should have marked this espressivo. I think you should have had some kind of guidance, some kind of dynamic variation here, some guidance, some shaping, and I think that just would be a much, much clearer kind of a thing. And you should also mark it solo, just like the way that you've got this all here. So these are going to be really beautiful background kind of sounds. And like here is where you could bring that damn harp out and have it play the left-hand patterns, right? Like just like you sort of have got some sort of thing going on here. So here is where I would completely authorize that. All right, and then when we're getting into da 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 dum bum ba bum, then you could get a little bit more creative. And I'm not going to say what you should or shouldn't do there. This is kind of cool, the timpani in the background. I would make it even softer, right? And then here, unless you are bringing in the rest of the orchestra in a strong way, I would not go all the way up to a forte in this roll. And you notice that you can barely hear the chimes, right? Okay, and part of that is because chimes get absorbed. Like they really do, and like who knows what will absorb them. But part of it is that they are a very complicated sound, right? Like the actual fundamental that you hear in a chime is an invention of your own imagination. It is something that your ear thinks it's hearing, but it actually isn't. It is the effect of the overtones around that chime note, right? That are creating the idea of that note in your mind. So that means that you have to be careful about how this is all scored. I think that, if this were marked like maybe mezzo forte with a tenuto mark or an accent or some other kind of thing where they're just obviously, part of the effect here is not just the sound of the note, which gets easily buried, but the striking of the bell, the the rawhide hitting the top of the tubular bell, right? That has to be part of the sound. Like you are, like, yeah, you've got this all tremolo and you got this, you think that you've got some space, but it is actually more complex. Right? If things were not tremolo and they were very soft and they were sort of more widely spaced than you've got here, then the chime would come through really clearly the way that you have it scored. But it just, even in the mock-up, it's really buried deep, deep down. And then here you've got the strength of the music is increasing, but there's no guidance to the chimes, right? It's like it's not getting any louder. Right, and it will just get buried deeper and deeper into that texture. I mean, if that's your intention, that's fine, but you should really be marking like sempre mezzo piano or something. But I mean, why add it at all if it can't be heard, and it's not really contributing to like it's not creating a subtle textural effect. It's not creating really anything, right? So just really be careful how you call for a chime note in a even in a soft, bustling texture. It really has to have a clear tong kind of a sound, right? So just, I would mark accents and I would mark it mezzo forte. So yeah, and then flutes and clarinets playing octaves. That's all very, very cool. And then I think at this point, like it's there was probably a ton more things that you were planning to do, so it doesn't really make any sense for me to critique it or add too much feedback. But I do think that this is sort of half there as an orchestration, this section in here, and it would have been nice to see it completed, right? So speaking of completing things, I think that completes my feedback for this piece, and I hope that I made it worth it. Since you didn't have as long of a score, I just decided I would add more detail, more critique, more feedback, almost like more of a coaching session, like what I would normally do with a professional score being prepared, right? Just really get into the DNA of things and really talk about the different subtleties and so on. And, I still do that, even with longer scores, but it just was a nice way of kind of making it more worth your while. And I hope it was in this case, because it's, like the overall approaches of all this stuff was just really fascinating. It's just some very cool ideas, Andrew, and it's just like a matter of kind of getting more familiar with the the realities of certain things, of the strengths and the optimum sound and so on and so forth. But what is the best way to use certain effects. But I think once you get more of a grasp of that, I think your craft is just going to get stronger and stronger. And I really look forward to seeing what you could possibly do with these challenges over the next 3 years. The one coming up next year. All the different options that would be available with that, and then the really unusual piece that we'll be studying the year after that, which will be a challenge in many ways, but so rewarding. And then the huge plethora of options presented at our 10th anniversary. So that's all stuff to look forward to, and I'm hoping that you're going to be a part of that, Andrew, because you got something cool happening here. So thank you so much for being a part of this, for helping me raise money for Ukrainian musicians, and for supporting the channel, and and for being a part of the community, and for everybody else out there who's watched this far. Whether you're a Patreon supporter, and I owe you some thanks for that, for along with Andrew for helping me keep the channel going. Or website subscriber, or just a member of the community who's interested, watches these videos. You guys know what to do. Add some comments below. Address some of the things that I didn't have time to talk about, that I might have seen but thought, somebody else will comment on this, or some things that I may have even missed. Right, that certainly happens. Everybody sees some strength, some angle that they know about that I don't. Right? Whether they're maybe a player, of one of those instruments, or they've got a different experience than me. That's all really welcome, and I look forward to seeing that below. So thank you so much, everybody, and just look forward to more evaluations coming as fast as I can put them out for the next few weeks.